What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another tutorial. My name is David. Today I'm going to show you guys some simple ways on how to EQ some drums. So I have this beat here. Let me play it out so you guys could hear it. Okay, so that's pretty much the beat right there. Just what's called repeats itself. So as you can tell, I stemmed out all the files, and there's nothing on none of the channels. So when I usually EQ drums, I usually start with the low end and then work my way up. So I'll usually start with the 808 and then the kick, then I'll go to the snare, the clap, and then the hi-hats, because for me the hi-hats are the simplest. We could actually do that right now. So I usually solo it. I know there's many different ways on how to EQ stuff. This is just the way I do it, and it's not the final way, so this is just to get like a rough mix. And then when I'm actually mixing the song, I go more like in depth and EQ certain stuff. So let me play out the hi-hats. The first thing I do is actually just take out this the channel EQ. You do it by clicking this, and I play it. And as you could tell, you can only see this part, but there's actually like a little cool thing where if you come here and click and drag up all the way up, you could see more frequencies. As you can see, it got higher, and you can bring it down lower. So you just grab this and I'll roll off all the low out here. And I also cut some of the high off too. But with this, I make a sharper EQ. I mean a sharper slope, so I go to 48. This one I keep it at 24. You go 48 too, but I just keep it 18 to 24. But this one I make it sharp, and I do this, look. So I usually cut that much off. It doesn't make a huge difference, but I just do it for some reason. So that's how you do the hi-hats. Same thing with the open hat. We'll just do it backwards. We'll start with the high and work our way low. My bad. And same thing, you just bring this up. As you can see, all this low, you wouldn't really want it in the mix, because then your low one's gonna get all muddy, so you're better off just cutting it. And with this one, I make it like usually a 12 for the open hats, because I want some of the mids, the mid-high, just to pass through. I just do it enough. I just cut out enough where it doesn't affect the actual sound, but it does. Overall, it's going to make a difference when you play it together. Okay. So once you have the highs, you can work your way to the snare. And I usually just mute. I usually go each instrument muted. I know a lot of people say EQ the whole drums as one, but I feel like it's different from when you actually record the drums with mics and when you use samples like this, because that, like, a lot of these sounds are already processed and they're already EQ'd or compressed to some extent. So you just cut the unnecessary stuff, and to do that I just solo it out. I usually use the same EQ for everything. I know there's a bunch of different EQs. If you go here, you go to EQs, there's the channel EQ, the one we're using, the linear, the matched, single band, the vintage. I've been using this one, the tube, for the kicks. I might use it for this tutorial. If not, I'll just show you how I do it with the channel EQ. But let's get back to it. The snare. Same thing, bring this up. Usually this is like the body of the snare, and if I cut, I usually go around 18 or 12, and I just slowly bring it in. And you just really want to do it to get just the low of the snare. I know a lot of people just cut to 100 and do a hard cut. But for me, I really don't like when the snare hits my ears for some reason. So that's why I cut a little bit more. It's all preference to you. I know a lot of people like hard hitting snares. I personally don't. I just like the snare there, but where you can still hear it and feel it a little. Another thing I do is actually just go to 400 hertz, make this band. If you click this is the size of the band. As you can tell, it goes up. The lower it is, the bigger it is. So if I were to bring this up, it looks like that. I just thin it out, usually to 130, and when I play it, you're gonna hear a lot of air. Now you just cut that out. Another cool trick you can actually do with the snares is actually just put a low pass filter, and you can give a different feel of a snare. But I usually just leave a lot of the high end. You could also go to around 2000 hertz, and you could bring it up so you get more of a high pitched snare. I might just take this off or bring it down like that. So okay, so this is how it's sounding right now. If I were to take this off, it doesn't make a huge difference, but so far the snare is sounding a little bit better. Now we go to the kick. It's a really soft kick because I didn't want the 808 and the kick to clash that much. So usually for the kick, I would, well, let me get a new one. Channel EQ. If you look at the kick, it's looking like this. It doesn't have a lot of low. It has a lot of mids and a couple frequencies here. And then this. Usually I would cut the high off. Go to 200 hertz and I cut this too. Bring it up. You just cut that out, and I do the same thing at 400. And the reason I cut this two frequencies out is because it brings in a lot of error. And then since I matched the 808 with the kick, I'm gonna cut about then bring in the 808. I would cut about that much off, just for they don't really clash. For the 808 could take up most of the low end. So now we can start with the 808, and as you could tell, the 808's hitting around these frequencies. So just cut the high off. And I just leave it. I know a lot of people actually do a hard 48 slope and cut 30 hertz off, since most people can't hear past 30 hertz or past, what was it? I think it was 1800 or 18,000. But I personally do it sometimes. For this tutorial I will. So now the drums are sounding like this. Let's see what's off playing. Now I'll just bring the snare down. That's how it's sounding right now. Let me take the EQs off and I'll play it. And it's on. Off. And as you tell, it makes a difference with the kick and the 808. They're not really clashing as much, but they still are. And well, to solve that, you'll just sidechain compress it. So that would be like the next step, is actually just compressing it. I know people compress then EQ, or some people EQ then compress. It's all up to you. I usually EQ it first, then I compress it, and then I re-EQ it a little more. So that's how it's sounding now. And it's with the beat. So far, so none of the synths or anything else is EQ'd so far. It's just the drums. I have this bass here. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because with this bass, the frequencies move a lot. So you just gotta watch it for a little bit and just watch it repeat. Usually with basses, it's the same thing. You just want to cut the highs out, and then just make sure the slope, just mess the slope a lot. I usually like letting a lot of the instruments breathe, so I'm not big on the whole 48s, the slope, unless it's really needed, like if I just want to be precise with the cut. But for the most part, I usually cut at 24s. And you can do the same trick, bring this down. And you can cut 30 off. And you can do the same trick, bring this down. And you can cut 30 off. 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 And you can cut time I really use 48s is like when I'm saying being precise. Usually when I cut 30 off, or sometimes a lot of the high end. It doesn't make a huge difference cutting this out, but I think when you play on like huge speakers, like DJ speakers or like music in the club, I think it does make a difference when you cut this out. So a lot of people leave it, so don't take my word on it. You could leave it or cut it. It's up to you whether you want to play it safe or not. I usually cut it because you honestly can't really hear it. So that's just the simplest way to EQ drums, is actually just cutting the frequencies. So the hi-hats are in the high frequencies, so you just want to cut the low out. Same thing with the open hats. They're like high mid, so you just want to, you know, shape the EQ this way. The snare gets a little tricky because each snare is different, so depending on the snare you have is how you're going to EQ it. For me, EQing snares is probably one of the hardest things. But for the most part, once you use snares, like the same snare over and over, you kind of have an idea of how you want to EQ it. And then let's say you make a really good EQ that you like. Like let's say I really like this cut for the snare, and I know I'm going to use the snare again. You could actually just save this. So you could go to factory default and just click save. Save as, and you could call it snare EQ, and then you save it as a preset, and it's always going to be here. So whenever you use the snare, you could always just drop this EQ on it, and then you don't have to EQ it no more. So it picks up your workflow a lot. You can do it with hi-hats. You could do it to pretty much anything. I don't really use it that much because I don't know, for some reason I just like to EQ everything differently each song. But I know you could do that, or you can actually save this. So let's say you really like the snare, and then you compress it, go dynamics, put a compressor, and then let's say you just mess with it a lot and you really like it. So you could just also just click here where in the drum kit it's going to say a name. So this is a Young Thug drum kit where I got the snare, and you could just save the channel strip setting as a snare, and it'll come out under it would come out when you open up a new channel strip setting. It's going to come under, it's going to come out new user channel strip setting. It would come out as there as snare, so then you always have that snare EQ'd and compressed. That way you could just improve your workflow, and you could just keep making beats faster and faster if that's your type of thing. But for me, it's not really. So I just wanted to show you guys this way how to EQ your instruments. Let me play a before and after again with the EQs and without the EQs, so you guys could hear it. Hopefully it makes a difference, and hopefully you guys are able to EQ your drums better, so that way your mix could come out a lot better. Thank you. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching. Let me play this. guys have it again. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.